Welcome to Peninsula Seniors Out and About. Today we're at the Western Museum of Flight in Torrance for one of their celebrity lectures. Let's go see what Cindy has for us today.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming today. I'm Cindy Maka, the director of the Western Museum of Flight. You know, it's always nice when you can get two for the price of one. Aerial aces are rare birds indeed. And today we are privileged to have a man who has achieved not once but twice that mantle of a double ace. So ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Clyde East.
Thank you very much, Cindy. Thanks for the invitation. Well, what I would like to talk to you about this morning is what a tactical reconnaissance pilot is, what he does, what I did in World War II, and a couple of wars after that. And maybe it will entertain you for a while. If you've heard this before, I'm sorry, but it's the only one I've got. So we'll have to go along with it. But I started out my life back in Virginia in 1921, and I lived on a tobacco farm for roughly 19 years. And about June of 1941, I figured there must be something better in the world than working in a tobacco field. So I left my father and his two sons with the crop to get in and took off for Canada and hitchhiked up there at, well, it was kind of a tough do, but I didn't sleep for 2 whole days, but I managed to get into Canada exactly about 48 hours after I'd left Virginia. I was not at all sure what was going to happen to me, but the folks there turned out to be very nice, and I found out once I had arrived that I was only one of about 4,000 Americans with the same notion. We have to remember that this is June of 1941, and the United States at that time was gearing up for a war that they hadn't quite declared. And it was several months yet before Pearl Harbor came around, but everyone had a sort of notion that sooner or later we're going to be into this. Well, anyway, I and several thousand other young guys took off to Canada to see if they could not find a place in the Canadian service for a aircrew member. A lot of the guys knew that they didn't have the eyesight or other qualities necessary to be a pilot. Me, I didn't know, but I thought maybe I could be. So anyway, as I said, I was one of around 4,000 or 5,000 of us that went up, and I was accepted without any difficulties whatever with the Canadian recruiting service for the Air Force, and in less than a week from the time I left the farm in Virginia, I was out 1, 2, 3, 4 on the parade ground. And I like the people, I like the routine, and it turned out very well. I hope the Canadians felt that way, but I certainly did. I was proud to be accepted because I found out for a change that I did have the necessary physical condition to become a pilot. All I needed to do was to learn how. Well, about 8 months later, I found myself, after lots of preparation, guard duties and things like that, I found myself in a flying school. There I am in front of a fleet finch. I don't know how many of you gentlemen and ladies are aware of the fleet finch. It was a standard trainer from those days, and that's one that I'm standing in front of in Windsor Mills in the province of Quebec. And this is November of 1941. And this was about my first 3 or 4 days on the flying line, and consequently, I had a lot to learn there. But the weather, of course, this was Quebec. The weather, of course, at that time was in the 0 and below most of the time. And you can imagine how it was flying in a little puddle jumper such as that and trying to learn how to fly in the weather. And of course, I wasn't quite ready for that kind of a temperature. It was getting around 20 below up when we got up to 3,500 feet. So anyway, I managed to get along and did solo at about 10 and a half hours, which was a little bit longer than most, but I didn't wash out. That was the primary thing that you wish to avoid. Successfully through the Fleet Finch training, I moved to Dunnville, Ontario, and was introduced to the Harvard airplane. You might know it as the AT-6 or later as the T-6, but that was a real airplane as compared to the Fleet Finch. And I managed to successfully get through my training with about 160 hours in the Harvard, and with good instruction and a lot of patience on the part of those that were trying to teach me how to fly, I made it. I not only made it, but I was fortunate enough to be, out of 10%, one of the commissioned troops from that particular class. The rest graduated as sergeants, but most of them within 12 months were officers as well. But anyway, the big thing was that on one single day, I became a pilot, an officer, and was handed a set of orders that sent me to England as a fighter pilot trainee. Now, can you understand what it means for a guy who was used to hoeing tobacco for a living to be an officer and also a fighter pilot trainee? Now, for all through the Battle of Britain period, I had watched and had followed day by day the difficulties that the RAF faced with the German Air Force. And I couldn't have felt any prouder of the fact that I had taken the first step in order to being a Spitfire pilot, which is, at that time, was more or less the goal of every graduate from the Canadian flying program. Well, I worked out rather well. I took a couple of courses, refresher type flying, and when the time came around, I was assigned to a Mustang OTU. Well, I had always, from the time that I was expected to be a pilot, I saw Spitfire. But the fact that I was assigned to a Mustang OTU did not bother me at all, because that was a new airplane that the RAF had just received some 10 months before that, and it had already had a good reputation. There I am in England with my new uniform, and about as happy as one individual could be, because I had been assigned to a Mustang OTU and was going to be flying one of the fastest and the hottest fighters in all of Europe, barring none. It turned out that that Mustang job that I had was a recce pilot. Now, a lot of people are not quite certain where a recce pilot fits in to the fighter business. Well, we of the recce force decided rather early that a recce pilot was a fighter pilot with brains. And so I took it, and I was very much excited over the fact that I was going to be able to fly a Mustang. I found out very quickly that it was some airplane. Now, that is the very earliest model of the Mustang, and it had good armament and was not easy to fly, but it was an airplane that if you paid attention to what it was trying to tell you, you could go a long way in it. Anyway, there I am standing in front of a Mustang that had fired many, many shots in anger, because the Mustang had been introduced to combat in August of 1942, which was while I was still in flying school. And there were several of them shot down over the Dieppe raid that took place in August of 1942, and this is one of the airplanes that was involved in that particular not invasion attempt. It was just a Canadian division had attempted to penetrate into Dieppe and back out again. But they ended up losing roughly 50% of their force, the ground forces, in doing so. There was also, that was one of the biggest fighter meetings of that particular period. And it was only after the 8th Air Force got into the business that they managed to get as many fighters in the air as was over Dieppe on that one day. Well, following, might mention that we had a Californian who was in the squadron that I was later assigned to that shot down the first airplane that a Mustang had destroyed at Dieppe. But of course, they lost about 5 Mustangs over Dieppe that day, so it really wasn't a fair swap. But that was the first of the many thousands of airplanes that the Mustang did destroy before World War II was over. There I am sitting on the wing of a Mustang that gives you a little bit better view of exactly what it looked like. It was a neat-looking fighter. Now, this is a squadron that I was in. It was a Canadian squadron, number 414, and it was a great outfit. They had lost 2 pilots over the Dieppe, but as I mentioned before, they had 1 guy that had shot down an airplane, which made it sort of almost a break-even situation. By that time, this was in the summer of 1943. Well, anyway, I had a great summer that in 1943. I flew almost 50 combat missions, doing all kinds of penetrations into France and Belgium and Holland. And I learned what the war was all about. And every flight that I made, I learned a little bit more about airplanes, I learned a little bit more about combat, and I learned a little bit more about myself. One thing was that you could very easily be scared, but you better not sit with it, because if you stay scared for any period of time, you're probably going to get tapped. That's one of our Mustang lines at a gunnery school that we attended in early 1943. This is one of the flights that I was on. Fortunately, it wasn't my airplane. It was my leader's airplane. I flew wing on that, and he attempted to strafe a train, and that was the result. I followed him in, firing my guns, and nothing happened to me, but that's the kind of airplane he brought back, but at least he got home. And the interesting thing about that, or one of the most interesting things about it, is in less than a month, that airplane was back in the air again. We didn't have too many Mustangs, and it was a very busy outfit that we were flying in. Well, this is one of the things that we did when we were between flights. That is a good French-Canadian friend of mine who later became a general in the Canadian Air Force after the war. At about this time, namely the late summer of 1943, the first American Mustangs arrived in Britain. Now, the difference between the Yankee Mustang and the ones that we were flying was a great big engine. And that was the Rolls-Royce, Packard Rolls-Royce 66. And it made that airplane, without a doubt, the predominant fighter of all of World War II. There was nothing that could beat it until the jets came out, of course, but again, that's a later part of the story. So I decided that had always wanted to be in the regular military, so I transferred to the American Air Force, and this is the uniform that I was wearing in January of 1944. And I was fortunate enough to get assigned to an American squadron that was flying Spitfires at that time. So I joined the 15th Squadron, and we were assigned Spitfires until the new Mustangs that were already available to 8th Air Force arrived in England for the 9th Air Force. I was assigned to 9th Air Force, not to 8th. That is a group of guys that were in the same squadron as I was in about January, February of 1944. All of those guys had roughly a whole year of combat ahead of them, and they all made it, which was not true of quite a few of the fellows that were in the squadron, but they didn't happen to be in that particular picture. Okay, so we flew our Spitfires, and I loved them. I think that of all the airplanes that the world has seen, for a fighter pilot, there's nothing to beat a Spitfire. This was a 5B, which was the post Battle of Britain Spitfire, and was easy to fly, and it had the turning radius of a honeybee, just about, and could outfight just about anything in the air, except it did not have the range, and that's where the Mustang came in. And about April of 1944, our squadron received the new Mustangs with the cameras, and they were called not P-51s, but they were called F-6s. Anyhow, they turned out to be just as good as we had hoped they would be. On June 6, 1944, D-Day occurred, and I wish I could show you a better picture of the D-Day terrain, but that's the best I can do under the circumstances. But I was fortunate enough to be able to fly in the mid-afternoon of June 6, 1944, and was given a mission to fly something like 150 miles south of the invasion beach and see what reaction it had to the German forces that were known to be deeper into France. My mission itself was rather, as far as the ground action was concerned, turned out to be rather disappointing because there was no reaction at that time. But you have to remember that the invasion was less than 24 hours old at that time, and not very much could have taken place. But following, I would like to describe what the ground looked like. I moved in. We covered the Utah beach on the way in. That was our landfall, and I flew way south. And the first thing that I noticed as I crossed Utah Beach was hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands, of parachutes on the ground, which is where the 101st and the 82nd Airborne had landed. That was quite a sight. Also, the action on the ocean and at the beach itself was something that the world will never see again. I was privy to that, and it was something that I could never forget. You have never seen so many ships. You knew that some very serious things were going on just 3,000 to 5,000 feet below you. Well, I took up my route that was assigned, which was a railroad that ended up at a little place in France with a small airport. And as we were turning to the north to head back toward the beach, and this was the completion of our reconnaissance, my wingman called out that there were 4 airplanes ahead of us, and we assumed that they would be ours because that's what General Eisenhower had said. If you see any airplanes, they're going to be Allied. Well, these turned out not to be Allied because I told him, they're probably ours. He said, no, they're not. They're FW-190s. So we took what action? Those were actually the first FW-190s I had seen. I'd seen 109s before, but I'd not seen the 190. Well, anyway, we were close enough and we were behind them. So without further ado, we revved up our engines, turned on the gun sights were already on, and we waded into them. And we each shot down an airplane on the first pass. And as we broke and turned around for the second run, he saw another airplane in front of him that he fired at and swore that he had hits on it, but we could never prove it. Anyway, after about 10 minutes of jockeying there, the 190s were gone, and we were left with 3 fires on the ground. But since we could not definitely identify the fact that we had shot down 3 airplanes, we did get credit for 2. And that was 2 of only 4 airplanes that was destroyed on D-Day, 1944. Well, back at the airport, at the field, we created quite a stir because what had happened earlier that day that I didn't know about at the time was that one of our pilots had run across a 109 and had shot it down. So a total of 4 airplanes that was destroyed by over 1,500 fighters that were airborne that day, our squadron got 3 out of 4. And no one's ever been able to account for that, but we was not only, I was only, not only a lucky pilot, I was in a lucky squadron. Well, that was the way it went for quite a while until finally my squadron commander called me in and told me that I was going to be rotated to the States for R&R of 30 days, and I would be leaving very shortly. I didn't like that idea very much because for me the war had just begun. And I told him so, and his response to that was, you don't have anything to say about it. You're going home anyway. So but he says, you're going to go over and back by air, which means that you'll be back probably in less than 45 days. Well, it was October. This was in July. It was October before I was back in France again. Anyway, that is some of the gliders that were destroyed as they were carrying both riflemen and equipment. And they break them in half so that they could get the stuff out. This is me beside my airplane. And of course you can't see it, but there's one little cross on it. This is just a couple of days after D-Day. My crew chief was right up in a hurry and put a little cross on it. That particular airplane, unfortunately, I was on the way home when one of my squadron mates was flying it and was shot down. I visited his grave in Normandy about 3 years ago. When I got home, I decided I'd get married. So I had a 30 days leave and did get married. And my wife and I were happy together for something like 58 years. And we had 6 children. And one of them is right in front of you. And everything worked out just great. I was back in Europe, and that is a new airplane I was assigned. And that's my crew chief, Sergeant Ward. He was one of the best. That airplane flew, I would say, in the vicinity of 400 or 500 missions over a period of the next few months until the war was over. And that was without one single abort. And he was really a great trooper. The two of us are together. This is later on in the war. I went through the Battle of the Bulge in December of 1944. It was a rough time. I had a flight that they sent me up in the hopes that I could locate some Army units that were in bad shape, such as the paratroopers that were stuck in Bastogne. But I got down to an altitude that was lower than the terrain around it, and figured that was low enough, and I couldn't even see the ground. So I just had to turn around and come home and with a zero value mission, in a sense. But we tried. That happened for 3 or 4 days until eventually the weather cleared, and that meant that the Battle of the Bulge was over as far as our troops were concerned. I had the pleasure of seeing the destruction of several thousand trucks, other vehicles, tanks, and that sort of thing. And it was a very, very difficult time, and it was terribly cold. It was one of the coldest winters in the history of France. I had begun to go deeper into Germany, and on several occasions I ran across airplanes that I just happened to see, and which usually ended up in some kind of a fight, shall we say, and that was the result. You can see the dust, but that was an airplane I'd shot down. That is a HE-111, which is a light bomber, or twin-engine bomber that the Germans had that I shot down back in April of 1945. I took a vertical photograph of it, which is there. A friend of mine, an artist in Woodland Hills, made a picture of it and called it photo finish. Well, I'm afraid that doesn't do the picture justice, but the HE-111 is right below my wings, and I'm flying over it. It's a real good picture. That is pretty close to the end of World War II, and we're at a place near Stuttgart. The war is not quite over, but you can see that I believe if you could count them, you'd see 13 crosses on that particular airplane, which had my wife's name, whose name was Margaret. I called it Little Margaret. That was the third one of that particular, with that particular name that I had flown all the way back from the early Canadian fighter pilot days. Well, those are some of the airplanes that I contacted, and the two on the top were FW-190s. I shot down 4 of those. And that's a ME-109. Shot down 4 of those. And a picture of a Messerschmitt 210. But you see the airplane with the gear hanging down. That's a Ju-87 Stuka. I shot down 3 of those. And in addition, shot down a small transport that I never claimed. So that was, for me, the end of World War II. But we can take all the questions now, if you would like. Are there any questions that anyone might have? What about the War of the Pacific after I'd finished the one in Europe? Well, my squadron was scheduled to go to the Pacific. And we were rotated back through the states where we were supposed to get new airplanes. And guess what happened? Somebody exploded 2 atom bombs, and the war was over. Don't think we weren't all pretty happy. I didn't really look forward to fighting a war over water and in the Pacific. The question was, what about the gun camera film of my encounters? Well, our squadron didn't pay much attention to it. We should have, and it was an oversight on the part of the operations officer, probably. But no one really worried about it. But then we found out that the fighters' outfits were using those things and using them religiously. But we never made much of a thing out of it. Consequently, I don't have any of my film. If I had had any, it would have been lost, because once we came back to the States after the war, when the squadron was deactivated, everything disappeared.
The Spitfire had the Merlin engine, and so did the later P-51s. Which aircraft would you prefer?
Well, if I'm going to enjoy flying, I'll take a Spitfire every time. But if I'm going to try to fight a war, I would want a Mustang. Which did I prefer, the Mustang or the Spitfire? Well, the Spitfire was a lovely airplane. It was real light on the controls. And you could outturn and usually outmaneuver any airplane in the air, particularly the P-47, the P-38, and even the P-51. But again, at short range, and it did not have the ability to survive a lot of the punishment that the Mustang would.
What was difficult about the P-51 to fly?
I never found the P-51 particularly difficult to fly. A lot of people did. I'm not bragging about that, but it may have been just the way you learn how to fly the thing. But the one thing that is very dangerous about a Mustang is if you bounce on landing, as many guys did, and you put full power on it, the torque is going to get you, and if you don't watch out, you're going to end up on your back on the ground. And that happened up at Camarillo about 4 years ago to a guy who was checking out in his first Mustang flight. You see that Rolls-Royce engine has so much torque that at a low speed, without much lift on the wings, when you give it full power, the airplane turns as well as the engine, consequently in the opposite direction. And a lot of people were killed at that. It never gave me a problem, but maybe I never bounced one.
How many different models of the Spitfire did you fly, and which one did you like the best?
What model of the Spitfire did I like best? Well, I only flew the 5B, which was a great airplane, and it was obsolete when I was flying it. But again, it had all the characteristics of the Spitfires that went all the way up to the 21s. It was light on the controls, and it could be handled very nicely in just about any situation. However, it didn't have any range. They never were able to put on drop tanks on a Spitfire that were satisfactory.
Were all your victories relatively straightforward, or did you have any harrowing experiences? Did your aircraft ever get hit?
About the my encounters, did I ever get hit? Was I ever in a dogfight, so to speak? That's essentially what the question is about. Yes, I did get in a couple of dogfights, and one instance I had two ME-109s against me at one time, and I shot them both down. But as a general rule, I saw them before they saw me. And the first thing that they knew was that they were getting a bunch of 50 calibers into their airplane. It was this kind of a situation. The Luftwaffe was probably the finest Air Force that anyone has ever put together. And they had great airplanes and so on. But as you you all know, their super aces of the Luftwaffe ended up with 200, 300 victories. Our guys never got anywhere near there. But again, those fellows were eventually shot down because a German pilot never finished the tour. And he kept flying until he was shot down and usually wounded. Oh, he was fortunate if he was wounded because that meant he would get a vacation. But they were pretty tough on them. I'm happy that our Air Force didn't have that same kind of rules. So by the time that I was mixing it up with the Luftwaffe, I was getting guys that had no flying time to speak of, very low on combat experience, and I could fly circles around them. They just didn't, they weren't good enough, that's all. They were scared to death when they see a Mustang around because the chances were, unless they got the drop on a Mustang, if the they were gone. In some cases, the Mustangs were knocking down as many as 100 a day. And you can't keep an Air Force with that rate of loss. And some of their real super troops did last through the war, and I was fortunate enough to meet some of them. And they were great guys. And I certainly am pleased that I didn't meet them in the air in 1945, because they probably would have taken me.
I'd like to fill in a little history of Dieppe. Dieppe was a combined operation. The total plan was to go in, capture an airfield, and fly in a wing of Spitfires. I was on the squadron for the Spitfire.
Primarily, as I understand it, was primarily run in order to give the 2nd Canadian Division, Infantry Division, a bit of combat, since they had been in England for quite a while and had not done any, not had any combat. Well, the planning was rather poor. The forces were meager as compared to the resistance they found. So consequently, more than 2/3 of the division ended up either a prisoner or dead. It was a terrible bit of planning, and the support for the ground troops was totally inadequate for the job that they set out to do.
A question, did you escort any B-17 bombers into Germany?
Did I ever do any escort work? No, I did not. I was strictly a recce pilot, flying in twos over enemy territory, and we were rather unique. The fighters couldn't understand how two lone Mustangs could go 150, 200 miles deep into Germany with all the activity that was going on in the rear part of the theater, and not get shot down. Well, quite a few of them did, but again, more of them got back than were lost, but there were quite a few of them lost. Our squadron lost something like 18 pilots over a period of a year of combat. And that was fairly high. Of course, some of the fighter squadrons in 8th Air Force lost a lot more than that. But we were fairly lucky in that, well, actually, 18 is almost a full squadron.
You mentioned that the P-51 carried 50 caliber machine guns, I think 6. But the Germans, I believe all of them had guns and cannons. Did you ever wish you had a cannon?
this has to do with the armament of the Mustang, which was either 4 or 6 50 caliber machine guns. That was a formidable bit of firepower. We didn't have any problem with it at all. The RAF and the German Air Force had 20 millimeter cannon, and certain aircraft in the German Air Force had 30 millimeter cannon, where one shot could very easily knock down a B-17. And they found that they were quite effective at that. But our guys, with their 6 50 calibers, usually ended up as the victor over German fighters, just because they had a lot of power, and most of them were way ahead of the German Air Force as far as experience is concerned. Since we were fighting at the last days of the war, we were fighting, except for the jets, guys that had very little experience, and they had, first place, they didn't have enough fuel to really train those guys the way they should have been. But we had it all over them. There was no way they could have won that war.
The Spitfire had 2 cannons and 4 machine guns. Is that correct?
The Spitfire and the later models were almost always equipped with at least 2 20 millimeter cannons, and the British, for some reason, loved that 30 caliber machine gun, and they won the Battle of Britain with it. We often wonder how, but they did, and it was a good job, and it shows that tenacity has a lot to do with it.
Does Spitfire have 8 303s?
8 303s as a general rule. And if they, the Spitfire had, Spitfire's ammunition, armament, usually the later models had 2 cannon and 4 303 machine guns, 2 20 millimeter cannon. And they could fire them independently or together. I do a lot of strafing, yes. And did I participate in a lot of strafing? Yes. Being back in the, I was a flight commander, and I was able to schedule myself into these outfits, so I picked the most likely places where I would receive, could expect action. So consequently, I did a lot of strafing when there were no airplanes around. And one instance, I did get into a dogfight with a, this is in answer to another question, got it with a ME-109, I'm sorry, FW-190. And he managed to get 1 bullet in me. That's the only one I had. And almost 300 missions that I flew during, I'm sorry, 200 missions I flew during World War II. The question is, if I did any hunting on a farm in Virginia, did that help me when I was flying a Mustang over Germany? Well, I don't know if it did or not. At that time that I was hunting partridges and, on my dad's Virginia farm, I didn't realize that you had to lead a bird in order to hit it. And well, mostly when you're shooting partridges, they're going straight away from you, so you don't have to lead them. But no, I don't believe that did me any good at all. I can't remember using that, but it was only after we used to get on the skeet range and so forth in the two Air Forces, did we hear about this business of, you've got to lead it. And no matter what angle you're from, you have to lead it the same. That is, the same distance. It may be at a different angle, but you got to lead it. Well, but I realized, of course, after I started flying combat, that if you're going to shoot at an airplane, you've got to lead it way out there. Well, I hope that this gave you a general idea of what an enthusiastic pilot can do over a period of a few years. I'll tell you, I always considered myself to be one of the luckiest guys in the world, in that I managed to get through my training in Canada without any difficulties, serious. And I flew through Korea for over 100 missions, and never any problem. I lost, I would say, in the vicinity of 30 or 40 very close friends, which didn't have the luck that I did. It's kind of nice to be able to talk to a listening audience, and I really appreciate the chance given me by Canada, the United States, and a lot of very fine officers, commanders I've worked for. If it hadn't been for them, I don't know. I learned something from every one of them. As we started out, it's been a matter of luck. I don't know how much longer it's going to last.
Thank you for watching Peninsula Seniors Out and About here at the Western Museum of Flight in Torrance. I'm Betty Wheaton. I'll see you next time.